And welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. I am your host, James Just. With me today is my favorite author and should be yours, Mr. John Cameron.
Well, thank you, James. Appreciate it.
So it's been a crazy couple weeks, John. But a couple weeks ago, Senate Republicans killed the California ban on gas cars. Well, it's not just the Senate Republicans. It had already passed the House, and Trump's going to sign the thing at some point here, if he hasn't already. And so this is the interesting thing, though. There's a bunch of Democrats are upset, but the original ban was done by executive order. It wasn't passed, didn't go through the legislative process here in California. Newsom just declared that they're going to outlaw gas-powered cars.
So he got outbanned.
And so now I got outbanned by an actual vote. Huh. You know, the legislative process went through the legislative process, and they said no, states can't ban gas-powered cars. And so one of these, we got one group of people who are complaining over and over and over again about the threat to democracy while evading democracy routinely through the use of their own executive powers.
Oh, I think we have lots of examples of that coming up on the show.
We have lots and lots of examples of this kind of nonsense.
People screaming about, what is it, fascism, while enjoying the freedoms of. Anyway, back to this. If California, I live in California, and until I think it actually might fall off into the ocean soon. We always joke about it, that they've screwed it up so bad, it's just going to tear at the seams and go into the ocean. The things that they do are almost intentionally destructive. And, the idea, eventually, once we get another 500 nuclear power plants online and triple the capacity of the grid, you might be able to have all the cars be gas powered. But you certainly couldn't get rid of all the diesel trucks, because if you did, you'd have to transport everything by donkey. You can't get rid of railroads. You can't get rid of airplanes. California now produces how much total of the global warming gases, even though they're the third biggest economy in the world? Like
allegedly
1/3 of 1% of what China produces on a really good day. This stuff's insane. And the big problem is that the other blue states follow freaking California, and that's 40% of the automotive market. So in essence, they are setting policy for everybody else in the country. And you can't tell me folks in Oklahoma don't want to have good gas cars.
Well, people in California want to have good gas cars if you go outside of LA and San Francisco.
And Sacramento.
Yeah. Well, Sacramento you can kind of split, right? 60-40. It's not it's not as far left as. It's far left enough where you can't do anything about it, but it's not as far left as the Bay Area and LA. But it's more 60-40 rather than the 75-25 kind of thing that it is in the Bay Area and LA. But if you're in Shasta County, an electric vehicles are impractical.
Yeah. If
you've got a big ranch up in one of these places, electric tools, electric machinery is impractical. At best, it's impractical.
Yeah.
And at worst, it's expensive. It's just obnoxiously expensive, and somebody has to pay for that. And as we know, through our tariffs discussion, the end consumer pays all costs. So, there's a reason California is outrageously expensive. It's because they continue to interject themselves into the markets. We don't have a free market. We're not a capitalist economy in California.
Not in California. We're I think you would call it socialist. You might call it fascist. If I don't even own my house, because if you can't do what you want with your house, do you own it? It's I don't own my car because I can't do what I want with my car. If people can control every single part of your life, then you're not free. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah. If you need a permit to swap out the windows in your house, there's a problem there. That's got far beyond. Far beyond.
If I have to hire, according to the state of California, a licensed contractor plumber to put a water heater in my house, you can watch a YouTube video and have pretty much standard tools that most people have in their garage and install a water heater. But I have got to pay somebody more to install my water heater than I paid for my water heater, according to the state of California.
Even if they're just swapping it out, it's that's it. It is silly. And you're talking about silly, John. We're going to go move back. You know, a couple weeks ago there was a bunch of riots down in LA, right? And both sides are essentially arguing the same argument, that the other group is deliberately creating chaos for political policy reasons, right? Whether it's the left is claiming Trump's immigration enforcement is deliberately creating chaos the way he does it, and of course the right is saying the way the protests, we're going to use quotation marks there, the way the immigration protests were carried out was a deliberate attempt to create chaos. And so we've got this.
But the riots weren't. The riots weren't, according to the left, the riots were simply a response to the chaos created by the right, and according to the right, they interjected themselves in to stop the riots. I'm getting so confused.
It gets so confused, right?
I'm getting so confused.
Yeah, this is one of those, you tit for tat yourself away into a pretzel, right? There comes a point where you're no longer dealing with anything real. Yeah. You've got these phony emotions. But what I found interesting was there's a lot of people in LA were making this dual argument, right? On one hand, they were saying, well, these riots, that's just a small part of LA. They're not really that big. It's not big of a deal. For most of LA, life is going on as normal. Yeah. Don't have it's not really relevant. But then they want to turn around and say, these are a big movement, that they're showing how much the country is again. You can't have it both ways. You can't say it's so small to be irrelevant, but yet at the same time it's this big national movement.
You can if you're the left. You can discount the 200,000. I have yet to find, and I am researching like a madman, the accurate count for the January 6th demonstration. I can find easily how many people got arrested, how many people went to trial, how many people broke in. I can find the exact numbers on that. But nowhere can I find any kind of credible number on the number of people that showed up to vent their spleen and who were demonstrably mostly peaceful. Not the idiots that got sucked into breaking into the legislative process by all the FBI plants there. Oh, did I say that out loud? And so the idea that this number of people is somehow representative of
a national movement
everybody feels. I mean, according to the polls, even as bad as the trumpeter is screwing up, people are on his side on this.
Yeah, he's more popular than the Democrats, and so even the last one I've seen.
That's pretty scary.
And these polls, right? They're kind of hard. Trump is about a 44% approval rating. Democrats are down in the 20s.
Yeah.
And so
they're that high,
and they're dropping. So it's not like they're both dropping. Literally, everybody, all our political establishment is dropping in popularity like a rock. But are we surprised? I mean, when chaos is policy, deliberate chaos. Now we know why we have chaos, because it loosens people's pocketbooks. It loosens the activists' pocketbooks. Those, the vote blue no matter who, the hardcore MAGA crowd, they're more likely to write a check when they're scared, when there's chaos. They're more likely to got to have that fight.
And the opposite is true of the left. Oh, look at the poor oppressed people that you care so much about, because you've got 6 of them working on your estate, you Democratic donor. So you need to write a check so we can keep that cheap labor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud?
And here's the thing.
Nancy Pelosi came right out and said it. Who's going to mow our lawns and do our laundry?
The kid down the street, like we used to. What the heck? It's not that complicated of a task to return it to teenagers, like it should be, in a sense.
Teenagers, people on the lower rungs of the economic ladder that need a first job.
Yeah.
It's not. economics is actually pretty simple.
Yeah, and we're not against immigration here. Let's be
No,
clear. We're
no.
perfectly fine with immigration, but you can't have both. You can't have immigration and a welfare state at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a distortion of the market and creates.
Well, I think you can
lots of
just say you
problems.
can't have a welfare state and stop right there. But
Well, you know, Milton Friedman, you can do one or the other,
Yeah.
but you can't do both. It's just impossible.
you can be free or you can be safe. You can't be
You
free
can't-
and safe.
It's not possible. All right, so we're going to move on to Mr. Richard Fields this week. Richard Fields is talking about trade.
I'm shocked by that. Richard Fields
Richard's
is
talking about
weighing
trade?
in on trade again?
Hey, you know, let's see what Richard's got to say this week.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I always do.
Hi, this is Richard Fields with this week's report from the fields. Last week, we solved the immigration problem with a simple one-paragraph replacement for the Immigration and Naturalization Act. Anyone can immigrate. If once here an immigrant commits a crime or applies for government welfare, they're out of here. Congressman Correa, if you'd like the text of my proposed bill, give me a holler. This week we'll solve another, the trade problem. Recently, President Trump went to a steel plant in the United States to crow about how his tariffs on imported steel were saving American steel jobs. Maybe the president should do a little elementary study in metallurgy. Steel is largely iron ore, which the U.S. produces a lot of. But to make it steel, a number of other metals are mixed with the molten iron ore. One is nickel. Nickel is what makes steel stainless by providing corrosion resistance, kind of necessary for EV battery casings. Nickel adds strength and toughness. Less metal is needed to build a stronger bridge. Nickel makes steel more ductile, reducing cracking. Nickel makes steel more resistant to high temperatures, useful in jet engines. Depending on concentration, nickel can make steel more magnetic, or in higher concentrations, non-magnetic, useful in MRI machines. Nickel reduces metal fatigue. Your springs stay springier longer. In short, a lot of steel's usefulness comes from the addition of nickel. And guess where nickel comes from? Unfortunately, the U.S. is only the world's 9th largest producer. Indonesia alone produces 100 times what we do. The top countries combined produce 177 times more than we do. And they include China, Russia, and Canada, as well as Indonesia. And guess who funded the building of Indonesia's premier mine? China. Before we run off half-cocked with exorbitant tariffs on imported steel, we may want to consider that a lot of the places we want to tariff are our only realistic suppliers of nickel. And without nickel, we won't produce too much steel. We need to import nickel. Adam Smith explained the concept in The Wealth of Nations over 300 years ago. Despite Peter Navarro's fever dreams, the law of comparative advantage has not changed. We're better off importing things if doing so is cheaper than producing them ourselves, and exporting things in which we do have the comparative advantage. Sure, it's technically possible to produce bananas in a greenhouse in North Dakota, but it's a lot cheaper to import them from Nicaragua. Nicaragua has the comparative advantage in bananas. We have the comparative advantage in designing NVIDIA computer chips. The one and only reason we have an overall trade deficit with the rest of the world is because we, quote, manufacture, unquote, dollars to pay for stuff. So here's a way to end the trade deficit. Quit manufacturing the world's reserve currency and return the world to honest money, the gold standard. Our part, and the Fed. Free trade with everyone. No tariffs, no non-tariff trade barriers. In order to avoid putting two policies into one bill, this might require two bills. First, a bill to end the Federal Reserve and return to gold and silver, the money specified in the Constitution. Second, repeal all tariff laws and regulations and rescind all executive orders related to trade. One more call out to my Congressman Lou Correa. If you need help drafting this legislation, let me know. I'm Richard Fields, and that's this week's Report from the Fields. See you again next week.
All right. Thank you, Richard. You know, trade is an interesting thing, right? Because it's more, there's often more involved than just the pure economic factors. Mm-hmm. You know, do you preserve some part of an industry on the case you have a disruption, say mm-hmm. COVID, and everybody's supply chains completely collapse? Mm-hmm. You know, maybe it's a good idea to have some farmers, some people who know how to do some farming, or some people who know how to do mining, or some mm-hmm. people who know how to
build stuff.
Yeah, build stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, if it costs a whole lot more than it does to import it, then you're actually wasting your economic resources at the same. So it's not an easy, it's not the simple calculation that many of us like to think it is.
Yeah, and I forget the name of the. We need to move pretty quickly, huh? I agree.
All right, we're just gonna go on. We're talking about trade. Trump, he said the article says he gets a UK trade deal, but if I understand it, these things are more frameworks than actual deals. Yeah. If the way I kind of understand it, they've kind of decided on a basic framework, and they're going to go through and make all the minutia decisions, which is actually part of the problem, right? Rather than just having a basic, simple trade deal. Yeah, sure, you charge us 10%, we charge you 10%, everybody's happy. You know, we don't.
Except we had a guest on, a young guy that does import, export, and he said that the tariff book he has to use just on China maybe is like as big as a Bible.
Yeah.
It's insane. And, you know, that goes back to all the make-believe jobs there are in government. If they don't make things unintelligible, they don't have jobs. And so they're going to make it as complicated as they possibly can so that they can add some more jobs. That's pretty simple.
Yeah, so he's got this UK trade deal working. The EU talks are stalled. And he says Japan is tough. Well, but Japan is tough because Japan is, generally speaking, an honorable negotiator in business, right? They generally act honorably. So there's not much room for negotiation because you already have a solid deal. And so they're like, what do you want from us? We're not China who doesn't honor their agreements anyway. You're not these other countries. So yeah, you're going to have a tough time getting Japan to renegotiate their trade deals. You just are.
Oh yeah, and then why should they? I mean, people in America have learned that you want a dependable car, you buy a Japanese car, right? So it's going to be really tough to mess with that. You know, let me buy, and I'm not putting, I understand Fords and Chevys, you know, especially when you look at trucks are better now than they used to be. All cars are magical compared to what they were 40 years ago. Surprised they don't make you coffee and give you a massage while you're driving down the road.
Well, I know 300,000 miles is not a big deal for a car, and it used to be 100,000 miles was the end of your car, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's probably at 80 you were looking to palm it off on some other poor schmuck. And before that it was about 35 because people didn't drive anywhere.
Yeah. So trade does make us all better. You know, in the long run, it makes our economies, you know, it increases everybody's life. But it doesn't mean there's not problems, and we have to accept that, you know, life has problems sometimes.
As long as we keep printing money, we're going to have trade deficits.
Oh, John, we're going to talk printing money. This one's, you know, we've got 9 minutes, John. So Social Security finances, John, are eroding further. And, you know, benefit cuts, we've been talking about benefit cuts eventually. They've been kicking this can down the road for years. But we're $37 trillion in debt now. And
what day is it? Might be 38.
There's no more can to kick down the road. We're running out of road to kick.
Yeah, we're gonna be without a can or the shoes to kick it with here pretty quick. So yeah, I got some words on this.
Yeah, knock yourself out, John.
Well, Social Security, I collect Social Security, and it's a goodly amount, and I think, and if it would. It needs to be cut. Mine needs to be cut. Doctors who get pensions from these big hospital monopolies of $150,000 a year, and they've got, you know, $3 million in their 401k, and they get a $4,400 Social Security check. That's insane. Social Security was supposed to be the difference between starving and out on the street and not starving and out on the street. It was supposed to be for widows and orphans, and people were supposed to die shortly after they started collecting it. And now we've got people collecting massive amounts of money and living forever. And we wonder why there's a problem. And it's now Social Security taxes on every check are, what, 16% of the check if you count what the company has to pay and what the individual has to pay. And then you add in Medicare, which is another 4 cents, like 22 cents out of every dollar that's created out there. Not top line, bottom line, goes to pay for Social Security. In England, you know what they do? If people have worked, and these are the English people, the people we call idiots and socialists. Doesn't matter if you put in if you earn $1 million or $1 billion or $50,000, everybody gets 101 pounds a week. That works out to about $136 a week. That works out to slightly over. That can't be right. Anyway, that's for people who only work 15 years. If you work full-time, it's, now I remember, I'm sorry, I'm eating a lot of time. It's 236 pounds a week, which is about $1,400 a month. And everybody gets the same because the design of it is to keep you from starving to death or losing your home, not make you wealthy.
Yeah,
we can't afford what we're doing. We have wealthy retireds who are not going to have anybody to pay the bill. We got to do something about it. We got to cut it. It's that simple. And the politicians don't have the chutzpah to do it, and old people don't want their trip to Mexico curtailed. So
no, it has to be means tested. There just has to be a means test in it, because unless you just want it to fail completely.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm not saying, these people put a huge amount of money in it thinking they're going to huge money out. How do you, as of tomorrow, it has to start sliding down. Say, look, rich folks, start counting on saving a few dimes somewhere.
Yeah, you don't cut it off, like, you don't just turn off the tap, you slowly close it.
Close the tap. It's got to be done.
It is such a... All right, so talking about taps, John, California, we talk about fire prevention here in California a lot. We've talked about how they don't do enough burning. And so now we've got a story where they went out and they spent a bit of money to go out and they burned, I forget what it was.
A couple hundred acres.
400,000, wasn't it 400,000 acres?
Well, they're supposed to.
They're supposed to burn like 400,000 acres. Yeah. And we're all for the burning. Yeah. But we don't need you to be patting yourselves on the back for doing something you should have been doing for a long time.
50 years ago. Yeah, yeah.
And also the point is, they also don't always burn the right places. They don't do the prescribed burns in the places where it needs it the most.
And there are places where they can't do a prescribed burn. Where it needs it the most is mostly on federal land. And every time they try to do it, Cal EPA, you have to get about a year in advance to get a permit to do a burn to prevent your house from burning down in a massive forest fire. And the radical green organizations sue every time they try to clear forests, national forests, which are owned by the federal government. And that's where, there's like 60 years worth of fuel on the ground in places in Yosemite. I've ranted about that before. But, if the Native Americans could figure it out, we should be smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah, it's you have lots of little fires to prevent the one huge big fire, right? Or you mitigate the chances of having one big fire. You're in California, you're never going to mitigate all the chances of having a big fire. It's not possible, but you can kind of reduce the chances that those big fires can be as damaging as they have been historically in the past.
Well, and if we would have done it right 100 years ago, when they laid out a way to do this, when they first did the forestry agreement about national parks and national forests, but they just completely ignored one side of the rule. But anyway, we probably need to move on.
Yeah,
burn more.
Burn more. That's the burn more. And I don't know why it's so expensive to burn as much. In California, there's so much
make-believe jobs.
There's even things that need to be done don't get done properly. All right, we got a couple minutes, John, and I want to get this New York mayor's race. We've got Cuomo. I always get the brothers mixed up, so I'm just going to use the name Cuomo. Cuomo is running for mayor. You've got the second place guy is some far left socialist, and essentially all the all the standard liberals are now coalescing behind Cuomo because they don't want this far left guy to win. And I kind of want the far left guy to win.
What, to completely destroy New York?
They're going to destroy it. I'd rather if you're going to destroy it sooner rather than later.
Quicker?
Break it fast.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe then the lesson will be learned. He wants to do rent control, not just rent control. He wants to freeze rates on 2.3 million rents in New York City, right? Yeah. Good luck with that, bro. All of the billionaires, pretty much all the billionaires are saying, yeah, Wall Street's portable, you know. These guys are all working on computers. We can just take all the wealth that props up all of your foolishness and move it right next door to New Jersey. Or, like most of us, my company wants me to move my trillion-dollar company to Florida because they love us there.
To Florida or Texas or Arizona or any of these other places where all these businesses are moving to.
Ireland.
Nashville. You know, especially internet companies are all now moving to a bunch of Nashville companies. They're going to Nashville.
Well, they like their country music, you know.
Yeah, it's because they have the infrastructure and they have the talent, you know,
And
around.
they got some nice, dependable nuclear power plants down there just pumping out electricity. So, yeah, they don't have to rely on wind turbines and prayer beads to power stuff like we do in California.
Well, and just stability, just some political stability where you know that, you know, you can actually plan 4 or 5 years in the future without having some bureaucrat completely change the way that, you know, your society is trying to work. Like we do in, like, you know, what is it, congestion charging? We've got congestion charges.
What are you talking about, New York?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and it's going to come the rest of it. You know, it starts one place, whether it's
And
New York
then
or California.
the minimum wage stuff and the lack of tipping stuff and all the insane ideas. And one of the billionaires, I couldn't find the quote, we do research, doesn't sound like it, but we do research, said that, yeah, you know, if we don't watch it, we're going to become San Francisco.
Yeah, well, and and it's not just San Francisco or New York. You know, Seattle's having this big issue. They had this income tax per, what was it? They had a business tax per employee, and so all of a sudden they have a $80-something million shortfall. We're not collecting as much money as we thought. Yeah, because they moved all their employees out of Seattle. You dinderheads.
Dummkopf.
Now, some of these things are predictable, John, but what's also predictable is us running out of time.
I'm shocked by that.
So, thank you for being here, John.
Thank you for having me.
Thank the crew in there for working hard. I want to thank you for watching. Have a great night, and please remember to love everybody.
Yeah, especially those who don't deserve it.